Welcome to True Crime Cases. Within the quiet city of Maplewood, where everybody knew every different's names and secrets had been tough to maintain, Dr. Julia Morgan was a reputable, determined, a skilled physician with a thriving exercise. She changed into known for her compassion, determination, and the calm demeanor she added into every patient's room. But underneath the floor of her apparently ideal existence, Julia was hiding an internet of deceit that would in the end lead to a shocking homicide that nobody saw coming. This is the story of the way a respected physician's mystery life of infidelity with her patients unraveled Maine to a tragic cease that shook the complete network. Julia Morgan seemed to have it all. A hit scientific practice, a lovely domestic in an upscale community, and a loving husband. Tom Morgan, who had constantly been her biggest supporter. Tom, an excessive faculty records trainer, was pleased with his spouse's accomplishments and frequently bragged about her to his colleagues and pals, to all people who knew them. Julia and Tom regarded to be an appropriate couple, shrewd, kind, and deeply in love. Their relationship had begun all through their university years, wherein Julia were pursuing a diploma in medicinal drug, and Tom had been analyzing education. They were the couple that anyone well liked, with Tom's easygoing nature complementing Julia's driven and bold personality. After graduation, they moved to Maplewood, in which Julia installed her clinical practice, and Tom began coaching on the local high faculty. Over the years, they constructed an existence together that appeared unshakable, packed with mutual appreciate love and shared dreams. However, because the years passed, Julia's life as a medical doctor became more disturbing. The lengthy hours, the stress of coping with her practice, and the emotional toll of dealing with ill sufferers started out to weigh on her. Tom noticed the change in his wife. However, he chalked it up to the pressures of her profession. He tried to assist her as excellent. He could, taking up more duties at home and encouraging her to take time for herself. But what Tom failed to understand became that Julia's growing restlessness wasn't simply due to the pressures of her process. Something far extra sinister became brewing beneath the floor. Something that would finally tear their lives aside. It began innocently sufficient. Julia had usually been empathetic toward her patients, frequently going above and beyond to make them sense at ease and cared for. But there has been one patient who stood out. Mark, a hit businessman who had been coming to peer Julia for normal checkups. Mark changed into fascinating, assured, and attentive in a way that Julia determined herself attracted to at first. Their interactions had been strictly expert. But over the years, a flirtatious rapport evolved among them. Mark might make casual comments about how stunning Julia appeared or how fortunate her husband have to be to have her. Julia, flattered by using the interest, determined herself, searching forward to Mark's appointments. Greater than she need to have one night after a especially traumatic day, Mark asked Julia if she would love to seize a drink with him to unwind. It turned into an harmless, sufficient idea, but Julia knew that it crossed a line still. She agreed, convincing herself that it was only a friendly day trip. They went to a quiet bar at the outskirts of Metropolis, wherein they talked for hours, approximately lifestyles, paintings, and the whole thing in among. As the nighttime wore on, the conversation took a more non-public turn. Mark confided in Julia approximately the struggles in his own marriage, and Julia determined herself, commencing up approximately her personal feelings of dissatisfaction and loneliness. They both knew that they had been treading risky territory, but neither of them appeared inclined to drag back. One drink became two, and earlier than Julia knew it. They were sharing a passionate kiss inside the dimly lit nook of the bar. It turned into a second of weak point, a fleeting lapse in judgment. However, it became also the beginning of something a lot darker. The affair with Mark became an ordinary prevalence, with secret meetings and late-night rendezvous turning into part of Julia's recurring. Julia informed herself that it was only a fling, something to help her break out the pressures of her existence. But deep down, she knew that she turned into playing with hearth. As Julia's affair with Mark persisted, she discovered herself drawn to the thrill of the forbidden, the secrecy, the lies, the excitement of being with a few, someone other than her husband. All of it became an addictive. Get away from the monotony of her ordinary lifestyles. However, Mark wasn't the only affected person who caught Julia's eye. Soon she located herself in similar entanglements with other sufferers. There has been David, a young lawyer who changed into dealing with the pressure of an excessive profile case. He came to Julia for pressure management and tension treatment, but their periods fast turned into something plenty more personal. David became prone and in need of comfort, and Julia became extra than inclined to provide it. Then there was James, a widower who have been struggling with melancholy after the loss of life of his spouse. Julia had continually had a gentle spot for James, and their professional relationship step by step developed into an emotional affair. James turned into thankful for the interest and care that Julia confirmed him, and he commenced to depend on her no longer simply as his health practitioner, however, as a confidant and friend. Extra patients accompanied Michael, an artist with a troubled past, and Richard, a former soldier managing PTSD. Every of them observed solace in Julia, and every of them have become entangled in her internet of deceit. To Julia, these affairs were a way to address her own disappointment, a way to experience favored and needed in a manner that her marriage no longer furnished. However, the more affairs she had, the extra complicated her life became. Julia turned into continuously juggling lies, sneaking around, and living in worry of being caught. She knew that what she was doing became wrong. But the thrill of the name of the game relationships changed into too intoxicating to give up. In the meantime, Tom beginning to observe adjustments in his spouse that he couldn't ignore. Julia was regularly distant, distracted, and irritable. She spent greater time at the office, and when she turned into domestic, she became constantly on her telephone, texting or checking messages. Tom tried to talk to her about it, but Julia disregarded his worries, insisting that she was simply stressed from work. But Tom couldn't shake the sensation that something changed into incorrect. He started paying greater interest to Julia's behavior, noticing the manner she would smile at her telephone or the manner she seemed to be misplaced in notion more frequently than now. Not he even started out to surprise if there has been a person else in her existence. But he pushed the idea apart. Now not trying to accept as true with that his loved spouse could be unfaithful in the future. Tom decided to wonder Julia by bringing her lunch at the office. He knew she were operating long hours and concept. It might be a quality gesture, but whilst he arrived on the medical institution, he changed into advised that Julia be come out to lunch with a patient. Tom felt a pang of jealousy. However, he didn't need to jump to conclusions. He waited in her office for her to return. But when Julia walked in, she became visibly startled to look him. "Tom, what are you doing here?" Julia asked, her voice trembling barely. "I thought I'd surprise you with lunch," Tom replied, looking to keep his tone light. "But I see you already have plans." Julia quickly recovered from her preliminary shock and compelled a grin. "Oh, it become only a ultimate minute element. A patient turned into having a difficult day, and that idea it might be good to talk over lunch. However, I might love to have lunch with you too." Permits cross as they sat all the way down to consume. Tom couldn't shake the feeling that Julia was hiding something from him. He tried to interact her in communique. However, she became remote. Her thoughts simply somewhere else. Tom knew that he needed to get to the lowest of anything changed into taking place, but he failed to want to confront Julia without greater evidence. He decided to provide it extra time, hoping that she would come to him and tell him the truth. But Julia had no aim of confessing. She changed into too deep into her affairs, too consumed by using the lies she were telling. And as time went the stress on her marriage grew, pushing her and Tom in addition. Aside, the breaking point came one night when Tom obtained an anonymous letter inside the mail. The letter contained no return address, only a single piece of paper with a typed message, "Your wife is dishonest on you," with a couple of persistence. Tom's heart sank as he read the phrases he had constantly feared that Julia might be untrue. However, seeing it in black and white became like a punch to the intestine. He sat down, seeking to technique the information. However, his thoughts was racing. Who had dispatched the letter? Was it genuine? And in that case, how lengthy had this been going on? Tom knew he couldn't ignore the letter. He decided to confront Julia that night, hoping that she could deny the accusations and put his mind at ease, however, whilst he confirmed her the letter. Julia's response became now not what he had anticipated. She paled, her eyes widening in shock as she studied the word Tom. I don't know who sent this, but it is no longer true, she stammered. But Tom may want to see the fear in her eyes, the manner her fingers trembled as she held the letter. He knew then that the letter changed into telling the fact his wife were cheating on him, and the awareness shattered him. How long, Julia? Tom requested, his voice breaking. How lengthy have you ever been lying to me? Julia tried to deny it, but the weight of her guilt became too much to bear. She ought to see the harm in Tom's eyes, the betrayal written all over his face. Her defenses crumbled, and he or she broke down, tears streaming down her face. It wasn't imagined to be like this, Tom, she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. I by no means meant to hurt you. It simply passed off. Tom felt his world collapsing around him. The female he had cherished and relied on for such a lot of years had been living a double lifestyle, hiding her affairs with endurance in the back of the facade of a loving wife. The ache turned into unbearable, and he didn't understand the way to reply. He felt a surge of anger and disappointment all at once, but most of all, he felt an overwhelming feel of loss of the life, he had, lack of the destiny he had envisioned with Julia. Why Julia? He requested, his voice trembling. Why might you try this? Wasn't I enough for you? Julia couldn't meet his gaze. She could not give an explanation for the motives at the back of her movements, due to the fact even she did not fully apprehend them. The joys of the affairs, the escape from her own disappointment, the need to feel desired, it had all driven her to make choices she now deeply regretted. I am so sorry, Tom, she stated, her voice barely above a whisper. I by no means wanted to hurt you. I have made such a lot of mistakes, and I ought to take all of it back. However, Tom could not find it in himself to forgive her. Not in that second. The betrayal became too deep, the wounds too sparkling. He stood up and walked out of the room, leaving Julia by myself together with her guilt and shame. Inside, the days that observed Tom's ache grew to become to anger. He couldn't prevent thinking about the letter, the affairs and the lies Julia had informed him. His consider in her became shattered, and he felt like an idiot for now, not seeing the symptoms in advance. The love he had once felt for her turned into, now tainted with the aid of the bitterness of betrayal. Julia, too, turned into spiraling. She attempted to reach out to Tom to mend the rift among them. However, he had shut her out completely. The silence between them turned into deafening, and Julia felt like she changed into drowning. In her own guilt, her affairs had given her a brief escape from her problems. However, now she became facing the results of her actions, and the weight of it was crushing her. The patients with whom she had been concerned commenced to distance themselves, sensing that something had changed in Julia. The pleasure and charm that had once drawn them to her were long past changed by means of a sense of unease and tension. Julia's exercise commenced to go through as a result, with sufferers canceling appointments and rumors spreading about her unprofessional behavior. As her life persevered to resolve, Julia found herself feeling more remoted than ever. The affairs that had once brought her pleasure and achievement now appeared hollow and meaningless. She had lost the entirety that mattered to her, her marriage, her career, and the respect of the network. And with each passing day, the guilt and regret grew more potent, gnawing at her from the inside out. Tom's anger and resentment festered over time, ingesting him from the inner. He could not allow go of the betrayal, couldn't find a way to flow past the ache. The love he once felt for Julia had become something dark and twisted, a toxic mix of rage and heartbreak that he could not escape one night after weeks of sleepless nights and obsessive mind. Tom reached his breaking point. He couldn't bear the idea of living in the equal house with Julia anymore. However, he additionally couldn't deliver himself to leave. He felt trapped in a nightmare, not able to discover a manner out in a match of desperation. Tom decided to confront Julia one final time. He wanted answers needed to recognize why she had achieved what she did. He stormed into their bedroom, in which Julia becomes sitting on the threshold of the mattress, lost in her very own mind. "Why, Julia," Tom demanded, his voice trembling with anger. "Why did you try this to us? To me, I gave you everything, and that is the way you pay off me." Julia appeared up at him, her eyes filled with sorrow. "I am sorry, Tom," she said softly. "I do not know what else to say. I have made so many mistakes, and that I can't alternate what I've accomplished." But her apology simplest fueled Tom's rage. He couldn't take delivery of that. She had thrown away their lifestyles together for meaningless affairs, together with her persistence in his mind. She had destroyed the whole lot that they had built, and he couldn't forgive her for it. In that moment, something snapped inside Tom. He felt a surge of anger so extreme that it crushed his senses, clouding his judgment without thinking. He grabbed the nearest item, a heavy glass paperweight from Julia's table, and hurled it at her in a blind rage. The paperweight struck Julia on the side of her head with a sickening thud, and she collapsed to the ground, blood pooling round her. Tom stood there, frozen in shock, as the truth of what he had just accomplished began to sink in the anger that had ate up him. Best moments earlier then turned into now changed with the aid of a bloodless, numbing fear. He dropped to his knees beside Julia, his palms trembling as he attempted to prevent the bleeding. However, it became too overdue. The blow had been fatal, and Julia became already long gone. Tom's fingers have been stained along with her blood, and he knew that there has been no undoing what he had finished. Tom's lifestyles, already in ruins, turned into completely shattered. After Julia's dying, the government were referred to as, and he changed into arrested at the scene. Nevertheless, in surprise and protected in his spouse's blood, he confessed to the murder, not able to recognize how his existence had spiraled so out of manage the trial that observed become a media sensation, with the as soon as respected medical doctor's affairs and the stunning murder dominating the headlines. The small city of Maplewood was rocked through the scandal, and the community that had once fashionable Tom and Julia now appeared on them with pity and disdain. At some stage in the trial, Tom's protection argued that he were pushed to a breaking point through Julia's infidelity and the mental torment he had persevered as a result. However, the prosecution painted a special photograph considered one of a man who had allowed his anger and jealousy to devour him, maim him, to dedicate a brutal and senseless homicide. In the end, Tom became located responsible of 2D murder and sentenced to existence in prison. The as soon as promising trainer, known for his kindness and determination, became now a damaged man, haunted by way of the recollections of what he had executed in prison. He spent his days reflecting on his moves, tormented via the expertise that he had taken the life of the woman he had once loved, extra than any something. As for Julia, her death became a sad give up to a lifestyles that were full of capacity. She were a talented health practitioner, a reputable member of the network, and a loving wife as a minimum on the surface. However, her selections had led her down a dark direction, one which ultimately priced her the entirety. The tale of Tom and Julia Morgan is a cautionary tale about the dangers of deception, infidelity, and unchecked feelings. It is a reminder that the alternatives we make will have a ways accomplishing results, and that the secrets we preserve can ruin no longer most effective our very own lives, but the lives of these we love for the metropolis of Maplewood. The scandal and tragedy left an enduring mark. The network became pressured to confront the darker aspect of human nature, and the tale of Tom and Julia have become a somber reminder of the fragility of life and the unfavorable strength of lies. In the end, there are not any winners in this story. Best broken lives, shattered goals, and the haunting reminiscence of what might have been. However, perhaps in telling their tale, others can analyze from their errors and discover a manner to keep away from the same tragic fate. This has been another episode of Shadowed Secrets and Techniques, in which we discover the darkest corners of the human thoughts and the crimes that shock the sector. Do not forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to live updated on all our modern-day episodes until subsequent time. Stay secure and hold your loved ones near.